Hey everybody, happy Monday. Today is Monday, October 26th. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon and welcome to TechStrong TV. We have an exciting lineup of speakers, interviews today. I am so excited about this interview this lineup of interviews that we have. Kicking off with Alan's interview with Brian Gracely at Red Hat. They're going to be talking about Kubernetes in three areas that are ripe, that are worth keeping an eye out on. He's also going to be talking after that with Achandra Ranganathan, sorry about that, and Kumar Chivakula of Apsara. They just joined the market, and we're going to hear more about what their company is, what they do, and what pain points they're actually helping in the market. We also have in another edition of DevOps Unbound, which is a panel discussion of outsourcing DevOps, oxymoron or truth. I'm really looking forward to that conversation. We also have the latest in news headlines, and then I actually have a great conversation with Maxim Fativ, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Temporal, talking to me about their new orchestration platform for microservices and how they actually have a code-first approach for open source runtime for multiple production scenarios. Good stuff. I had a great time with talking with Maxim. We also on today's show have another edition of Mitch Ashley's Analyst Corner, and as well as an interview Mitch did with Narinder Maken, who is the CEO of HealthPer. Great stuff on today's program. Please stay tuned. We've got lots of stuff coming up for you. But first, this commercial message. Welcome back. First up on TechStrong TV, we have an interview between Alan Schimmel and Brian Gracely of Red Hat. They're going to be talking about three areas to watch in Kubernetes. So let's watch now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another segment here on TechStrong TV. Our guest for this segment is my friend Brian Gracely from Red Hat. Brian has been a frequent guest contributor, not just to TechStrong TV, but to our DevOps chats and articles and so forth. They're on both Container Journal and DevOps.com. Brian, welcome. Hope all is well with you.
Alan, great to be with you. You know, I love our conversations. You've got a curious mind, so I'm always good to talk to you.
Okay. Sometimes that'll get you in trouble, those curious minds. But anyway, we've got the Red Hat in the background. Let's hop right into things, Brian. We on the deck today is we've got three Kubernetes related kind of areas we want to touch on with Red Hat. I'm going to let you delve into each of those. But before we do, in case I take it for granted, everyone knows who you are. You've been here, but just maybe a quick background on your position at Red Hat.
Yeah, sure.
Where we go from there.
Sure. So welcome everybody who may not have never met before. My name is Brian Gracely, Senior Director of Product Strategy for Red Hat's cloud platform. I've been with the OpenShift team for about 5 years, so I've been around this Kubernetes community as it's just got started, and now it's massive and growing. So that's me.
Very cool. All right, Brian, let's dive into it. Three different areas we want to touch on. I'm going to let you kind of take the lead.
Yeah, sure. So, KubeCon's coming up, and it used to be that we would always talk about, Kubernetes 1. Something. We're way beyond that now. So, I want to hit on three things. The first one is virtualization. So bringing native virtual machines to Kubernetes. We're really excited about that. A lot of times people say, well, wait, is that going in the wrong direction, right? We used to do virtual machines, we moved to containers. And I think there's that's fair. I think the thing that we like to talk about is customers are basically saying, look, there is not a single sort of jump the shark moment, right? There's not a point in time when everything just automatically moves. And so they've come back to us a lot of times and said, will we be able to get both these things under one umbrella? And this is the example I always use for people, because there's always a natural inclination to say, are we going backwards? Should we really bring, sort of legacy or heritage stuff forward? If you go off and talk to a bank, an insurance company, any sort of large enterprise, and you ask them one real simple question, you want to build an application, some aspect of it needs a virtual machine. Maybe it's a database, maybe it's, something that doesn't get containerized. Here's the question to ask. How long would it take you to get that provisioned? And unfortunately, in many cases, they'll tell you, like, it might take me a month, it might take me 3 months, which sounds insane because we know the core technology to get a virtual machine is instantaneous, but there's so much bureaucracy that's been built up over the years of, virtual machines are about stability. They're about, not things, we're not encouraged for them to go fast. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, look, you're going to have applications that are a mix of containers and virtual machines. I want to give you, through self-service of virtual machines, through the same platform, the ability to get either one of those, get them as quickly as you need to, and then don't be afraid to give them back. Because a lot of what comes out of this is people would get a virtual machine, they would get the biggest one they could possibly get, they'd way over provision things, they'd never give them back. And then you've sort of exasperated this problem of, I couldn't get it, it took forever, and now I'm wasting resources. We've made virtual machines a first-class citizen in Kubernetes. It's completely self-service. It uses all the same primitives that we use in Kubernetes. And so you can really easily combine an application that needs some aspects that are containers, it has to move fast, and some aspects that still need a virtual machine, like I said, like a database, but give it to you on developer time, if you will. And so we're really excited about being able to accelerate something that's people have known for a long time, but they've never known it at the speed that we can do with containers.
Absolutely. So, Brian, I want to, in my mind, there's two different use cases here. One is I am going to deploy, for lack of a better way of thinking about it, I'm going to deploy Kubernetes and containers on top of my virtual platform. And you know what? Though a lot of people may say, well, that doesn't make sense. The fact is that still is, I think, a very popular deployment scenario, is that your containers run in a virtual machine on top of a hypervisor.
Still the most popular way, yep.
Yep, standard. So that's one way of looking at this. The other way of looking at this is let's call it a true hybrid kind of thing where, not all of my applications run on exactly the same stack. Right. Some applications, whether they be brownfield or have some particular use case, are not going to be containerized or running in Kube, right? They're going to run in kind of my standard hypervisor virtual machine, hypervisor-based virtual machine. And then other applications really can take advantage of that Kubernetes and containerized environment, and we're going to do that. So, so I'm a big football fan, right? Yep. And to me, a great football coach is a coach that doesn't force his players to run the system that he's comfortable with.
Right.
A coach adopts his system to take maximum advantage of the talent his players have.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And here, that to me is the key of what we're talking about. You
it's the right environment.
Yeah, and it's the natural progression. I mean, I think anybody who's been around, right, there's a very distinct difference between, kind of what we see at events and trade shows, maybe what a startup can do because they have a finite amount of money. Enterprises, unfortunately, tend to be, it's kind of ugly, right? Stuff sticks around, process sticks around. So at some point, you are looking for sort of progression. And this is really that next natural step, which was we went from, purely stateless applications in containers. We started figuring out how to do, databases in containers, right? We've seen operators. This is just that next step that says you have all the tools in your toolbox. And if it makes sense for you, it's right at your fingertips, right? And the byproduct of all this is not, should I debate if something goes in a container, if it goes in a virtual machine? You're going to have some mix of that. That's a given. The real question is, are you making things easier for your security team? Do you have to go to multiple places to figure out if something's secure? How do you patch something? All that day-to-day mundane stuff that nobody thinks about until you're hacked and you're on the third page of the Wall Street Journal or you're on Hacker News. We're trying to bring kind of that completeness. And again, it's bringing the right tools, like you said, to people that are trying to do their job.
Yeah, that's exactly it. There's some part of me that still kind of shakes my head that we talk about hypervisor-based platforms as being, last gen, archaic, but we'll let it go for now.
Yeah.
So Brian, I think this is a real thing. And now let's specifically talk about Red Hat and how it enables that.
Yeah. So for us, as everybody knows, Red Hat, everything that we do starts as an open source project. So we've been working on a project called KubeVirt, KubeVirt, for a number of years. And the really cool thing about it is if you look at things like KVM and some of the Linux-based hypervisors, they're a process. And without getting super technical, containers are just a Linux process. So there was a synergy between, Linux-based virtualization and containerization. And what we've done is we've allowed those two things to kind of merge together. So what we enable is we take this KubeVirt project, which has been maturing for the last 3 or so years. It's based on KVM technology, so it's not a brand new hypervisor. It's something that's readily used all over the place. And we enable that within OpenShift. It's called OpenShift virtualization. And the simplest way to think about it is the same way that you want to just request containers or a Kubernetes scheduled environment, you're going to request VMs and a Kubernetes scheduled set of VMs, and you can mix and match them any way you want to. So we've tried to make it as consistent as your container experience is, but for virtual machines. There's literally no overhead because, again, we're using Linux processes. And the great thing about it is it now lets you mix Windows VMs. So if you have Windows applications that can't run in a Linux or can't run as a Windows container, you now have the ability to either do Linux VMs, Linux containers, Windows VMs, Windows containers. You have all that flexibility, and the way to provision it, it's all exactly the same. So, lots of hard work under the covers to make it as simple as possible for you to just say, I want to pick and choose the best vehicle for the type of application I have.
Fair enough. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So that's number one.
Number two.
Let's go to number two.
Yeah. So number two, it's great. You get a cluster up and running. Maybe you got a couple of clusters up and running, and all of a sudden you're successful. And then you start saying, great, I'm going to tell my coworkers about this. Some other department gets wind that you're being successful. And all of a sudden you've got 20 clusters, you've got 30 clusters, and those clusters might be a mix of dev and prod. Stuff might be in AWS, it might be in your data center, it might be in Azure. All of a sudden you have this need to figure out, how do I manage all these things? And we've seen a lot of really interesting evolution happen in the last year plus in terms of multi-cluster management. And so for us, we're really excited to bring the Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management tool. It allows us to manage literally thousands of clusters. So we've seen a big shift from people having really big clusters to lots of smaller distributed clusters. So you need visibility of those. But then you start getting into, again, the complex stuff of, how do I deploy a consistent security policy across all of those? How do I make sure that, if there's patch management that has to happen, I have ways to do that, not on an individual basis, but on a fleet basis. So we're really excited. Our customers, we've seen customers grow from 5 or 10 clusters to literally hundreds of clusters. And so now we can actually match them in terms of the management capabilities so that they can deploy them anywhere they want to, and have the security teams, the operations teams, the application lifecycle teams feel like it's not complete chaos. They have tools and visibility to make them successful.
Fair. Where are we in this rolling out and people doing it? And
yeah, so this is a really kind of a cool story. Obviously, when IBM acquired Red Hat, lots of speculation, somewhat different cultures, and will one consume the other? Like, what's going to happen? Totally fair questions. This was an interesting story. So IBM had been building some technology to do purely Kubernetes cluster management for a couple of years. We actually brought that whole team over to Red Hat. So all of them went from being IBM badged engineers to Red Hat badged engineers. We've specifically engineered some things to make it work even better with OpenShift. So we've built some multi-cluster API technology for that. And then the really cool thing that people are excited about is not only are we rolling out this commercial product, but we're going to take all that technology and do what Red Hat always does, and we're going to open source all of that. So there are plans to make all of this be open source, just like every other Red Hat product. So there'll be an upstream project. That code's already beginning to go out there. You got to work out a few licenses when it didn't start open source. But that's, for us, that's really exciting because we've got great talent working on this. We're going to have communities working around it when it's fully open source, but the technology's out there now and people can start putting it into use for their business today.
That's really cool.
Yep.
Really cool stuff. I love it.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
I can see why too. You want to do number 3?
Number 3. Yeah, absolutely. So last thing, so obviously lots of people think about Kubernetes. Kubernetes is an interesting technology, right? It started in Google. 10 years ago, it was Borg. You used to have CIOs who'd make these trips out to the West Coast. They would have given their left arm to have Google technology. 5 years, 6 years ago, all of a sudden it's freely available. That's amazing. But it's in your data center. It's in a public cloud. And then you start seeing customers who are used to using Docker. They're used to containerizing applications. And they start saying, well, everything we do is not in the data center, right? Like more and more stuff's on the edge, whether it's somebody like UPS who is doing really cool stuff out in their remote facilities for truck tracking and sending notifications because we're all, getting shipping packages, or you're on a cruise ship, or you're military and you want to put it in a vehicle or wherever it might be. People are saying, why can't I want to containerize applications, but then I need something small enough to fit out there on the edge, smaller form factor. Kubernetes sort of works, but I need a small form factor of that. And we're excited to be coming out with a smaller form factor of OpenShift. So you take the best enterprise Kubernetes platform, we're shrinking it down to fit on a small form factor, and then people get all the benefits of security and containerization, but in a smaller form factor that they can now say, oh, this can go in a store, this can go in a vehicle, this can go in a distribution facility, whatever that is. So we're excited to see Kubernetes move into new places as opposed to just massive data centers and clouds.
It's interesting, Brian. I did an interview last week, maybe the week before, with my friend Simon Crosby.
Yeah,
great guy. Simon, yeah, you probably know Simon from Zen.
Right.
And then Bromium, and now he's with a company called Swim.ai. Mm-hmm. And it's an edge platform or whatever. And we got into this whole conversation of why does stuff need to be small on the edge? Fit into the edge kind of,
right?
Image size or form factor. And what blew me away was the amount of information that passes through that edge. Right. Even though it's just an edge. I mean, for Swim AI, what they're doing obviously is rather than passing all data back to the central storage and analysis, they're doing analysis on the fly. But the amount of data that passes through the edge, though you may have to shrink your Kubernetes form factor to fit that edge environment. It's not that there's less information or less data flowing there. It's a ton.
Well, and it has harder security requirements because you tend to sort of not think about it as much. You want things like GPUs because, like you said, you want to do local processing. You want to, you got a ton. So yeah, we tend to think of it as, well, if it gets smaller, it must be dumber. It must be less capable. People want the capabilities. They just need the right economics to make it work. And we've been starting to do a lot of that work with telcos. So we made some announcements with Verizon. We're seeing others out in Asia. But yeah, we're now starting to see the enterprise go, hey, that's for me too. How do we get on board with that? So
yeah, no, the edge is going to be where the action is, or a good chunk of action is going to happen on the edge.
Yep.
And I think we need to start. I think people automatically, Brian, they hear your first part is, we got to make it fit to the edge, and they equate smaller with less capable.
Right.
And it's not. It's more we got to think like miniaturization. I saw somebody posted a meme the other day. It was a 5 megabit hard drive from like 1958 or something.
Right.
You needed a hand truck.
Yeah.
You get the sucker in.
Yeah. Now the iPhone has 2 or 3 GPUs in it. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, when we talk about miniaturizing or shrinking that footprint, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
The footprint doesn't necessarily mean a corresponding shrinkage of capability. And that's one of the interesting, it's been a constant, whether it's Moore's Law or anything else, right, in our industry, is that we've been able to do more with less in terms of footprint and still do it. But I think COVID's helped us realize that the edge is a new front,
right,
that we need to do. But I still feel like the edge is sort of maybe a 2021
right
sort of topic.
Yeah, it's definitely, there is a lot of complexity dealing with the edge. Just simple things like how frequently do I upgrade it, right? How do I match that Kubernetes comes out so frequently, yet I don't really want to touch it that so just little things like that we're going to have to work out. We're going to have to get better about. But yeah, I think we're excited about the early work, but yeah, 2021 is where you're going to start to see bigger announcements, bigger deployments. And then obviously 5G rolling out is, a 2021 thing for the most part.
It's also, but that's going to have a huge effect on the edge now, right?
Yep. And it always, it always ripples down. We can't imagine it until it gets there. And then, it's amazing. It's amazing.
You know what, Brian, we haven't even announced it yet, but we'll be doing our 3rd annual Predict conference. This will be Predict 2021, the end of January. Maybe you could come back and start getting ready a presentation about the edge, Kubernetes, the edge and stuff for Predict.
We'd love to. Yeah. Let us know. We'd love to be a part of it, be part of your community.
Consider yourself letting known.
All right.
You've been let known.
All right. Great.
Start working on it. We'll make it happen on the back end here.
Yep.
Very cool. As usual, always great stuff. We should mention KubeCon is coming up. Do you have the dates we could share with the audience?
I believe it's in early November, so it's just a couple of weeks away.
I want to say it's November 2nd, 3rd, or 6th, and
that sounds about right. It's always usually it's going to be that first full week in November. I think vendors do stuff on Mondays, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is the whole community thing. So it's exciting.
Yep, it sounds great. You know what? I think it's a little later. I'm getting a little voice in my ear.
little birds telling you it's moved back. I'm seeing November 17th.
It's November 17th to the 20th. Thank God for little voices. Otherwise, we'd all be in trouble, Brian. Anyway. Hey, man, it's great having you on.
Great to be with you.
Good to see you. Absolutely. Excellent update on what's happening with Red Hat. Three important areas here. You know what? If anybody wants to get more information on any of these 3 at Red Hat, where should they go, Brian?
Easiest place is openshift.com. So we try and keep it simple and lots of good stuff. I will make one small plug. I try and be real humble on your show. Forrester just did a great analysis of all the cloud or all the container platforms. They call it the Forrester Wave. There's a link out to that. We were sort of the distinct leader in that, so we're very proud of that. But yeah, if people want to kind of see how industry analysts are viewing this, openshift.com, there's a link to the reprint there as well.
Very cool, man. All right. Brian Gracely, Red Hat, OpenShift, here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel, and we'll be right back with another guest.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, we're back. Right now, that was a great conversation between Alan and Brian, but now let's go on to another conversation that Alan had, this time with Chandra Raghunathan and Kumar Chivukula of Opsera. They're talking about Opsera's entry into the market and their technology, and going to be lots of great stuff in this interview. So let's give it a look.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another segment of TechStrong TV. Really happy to tell you about a new company here on TechStrong TV. The name of the company is Opsera, and I have their two co-founders here with me now. And I'm probably going to mispronounce their names a little bit, and I apologize. They'll correct us. It's Kumar Chivukula and Chandra Raghunath. I said it in the right way, and now I got tongue-tied. Chandra Raghunath. Say it for me, Chandra.
It's Ranganathan.
Raghunathan. Close enough. I did my best. I'm going to call you Chandra and Kumar, if that's okay. Gentlemen, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you.
So, Opsera is the name of the company. You guys just sort of emerged, I guess, from stealth with a seed round. Some decent investors. Why don't you give our audience give us a little background? What's Opsera do, and how did you guys come to co-found this?
Thank you, Alan, for having us on the show today. I'm Chandra Ranganathan, co-founder of Opsera, along with Kumar. Opsera is a continuous orchestration platform for next-gen DevOps. So we are focused on making software delivery faster, easier, and smarter for developers, and also secure by providing them with an orchestration platform that orchestrates tools, pipelines, and insights by combining choice of any CI/CD tool along with no-code automation. So this came about in our prior experience while we worked at Symantec, where we built a private cloud ground up, expanded that to multi-cloud across AWS and Azure, as part of which we had to re-engineer a whole lot of workloads to become cloud native and support a lot of software development teams that had their own tooling. They had a variety of tools for various use cases, and we had to find a way to create a platform that orchestrated all of these tools quickly for them without taking away their choice and without taking away their control, while also having a governance framework that allowed you to track those tools, monitor the tools, provide metrics, etc. So that was a live, real experience that we had. And post Symantec, I was at Uber for the last 3 years, running their global enterprise infrastructure, where this was validated even more in terms of the need to have a platform that solved for many use cases and various teams and verticals. So that was the genesis of Opsera. And with Opsera, we're looking to provide choice and automation so that software delivery becomes faster, easier, and more secure.
Excellent. And then, in terms of roles, what role are you? What's your role at Opsera now, Chandra?
So I'm the CEO at Opsera. I'm responsible for commercial, the biz dev strategy, marketing, sales, and finance. And I'll let Kumar talk about his role as well and himself. Kumar is running tech with responsibility for product and engineering.
Kumar?
Hey, Alan, thanks for having us. And as Chandra pointed out, and we know each other for the last 7 years. We worked together at the various at Symantec, and before that we know each other. And at Symantec, we worked together and built the private cloud and as well as the DevOps tenancy. That's how the whole genesis started. And my role in the current at Opsera is managing the product and engineering and development and product operations. Yeah.
Very good. So, you call it a next-gen DevOps platform and orchestration, delivery orchestration. I think we have seen DevOps evolving. There used to be the the ultimate distinction of whether you were doing good or not was how many times you deployed a day, a week, a month, or whatever, right? I did 10 deployments, I did 50 deployments, right? But I think we're moving, not completely, but we're moving beyond measuring success by how many deployments you do in a given time frame. We're understanding that success is measured by how successful those deployments were. Did they do what they were supposed to do? How many bugs, how in some ways, how fast you had to redeploy or do your next deployment is a measure of how good the prior deployment was. And so I wonder if Opsera is a part of this new mindset in DevOps about it's not how many times you deploy, it's the quality of what you deploy.
Absolutely, Alan. So if I could just take a step back with some of the key trends that is also driving a solution like this. There's an adoption of and migration to multi-cloud even more today, especially accelerated by COVID and remote work. Because of that, to maintain competitive advantage, companies have to shift from planned scheduled releases to on-demand releases at any time, multiple releases a day. And there is a trend of shift left of security and quality. They cannot be an afterthought anymore. So they have to be integrated into your pipelines. And finally, there are so many tools that are driven by adoption of new technologies that you can't live with siloed analytics anymore. You need holistic insights that can be actionable and even predictive. So to your point, yes, we are absolutely focused on unified insights there's this value stream metrics that is picking up in the industry. And we want to also bring value stream metrics to DevOps, where it can connect development metrics back to your planning, OKRs, company strategy, etc., by providing metrics across several dimensions. So with Opsera, we provide metrics across 5 dimensions: development, planning, development, security, quality, and operations. So you're also able to easily get metrics with various contexts by releases, by teams, by technology, etc., and link it back to planning as well. So that's something that we heavily emphasize with Opsera too.
Excellent. We hear the word orchestration, and me anyway, and maybe it's just me, but I doubt. I think there are other people. We hear the word orchestration, and we think of Kubernetes and so forth. So I'm wondering what role, what companies are using Kubernetes, right? It's becoming dominant. How does Opsera play in Kubernetes environments?
Kumar, you want to take that? Want me to?
Yeah. There are 2 aspects. The continuous orchestration, before we talk about that as well, right? So in the DevOps world, as you noticed it, in the last few years, number of tools have been increased significantly, and there are multiple categories. And Kubernetes has happened to be one of the area that came and simplified the infrastructure layer aspect of it, but not the overall DevOps. And that's where Opsera comes into the play as a continuous orchestrator, bring all these tools together and make sure that we integrate, orchestrate, and also be able to deploy them seamlessly in the production. That includes Kubernetes as well. We, in turn, Opsera supports Kubernetes, and we built on container framework and microservices architecture. Loosely coupled architecture is one of the principles within where we deploy on Kubernetes architecture of cloud, of AWS, Google, or Azure, or on-prem Kubernetes framework, and then build the DevOps tendency on top of it. And in doing so, we're also addressing the multiple verticals of use cases. Within that, infrastructure as a code use case, pipelines, and we have a software engineering pipelines, a SaaS-based application like a Salesforce, a Workday, a ServiceNow, those type of pipelines. And last but not least is AI and ML. So all of them are possible using Kubernetes framework. We deploy the Kubernetes for each customer, within which we build the containers. On top of it, we build the secret sauce that we have, and then try to build these use cases. One other analogy that we can give it to people is when we talk about continuous orchestration, we are the mules of DevOps. And think about like the way the mules solve the data and integration. We solve it by bringing the tools together, by connecting them seamlessly without any code, and then be able to give the solution for the customer so that they don't have to worry about scratching their heads and how do we deploy this tool versus that tool versus integrating this versus that. So that's the value that we're going to bring to the table to the customers.
Excellent, excellent. Now, when you say it doesn't make a difference what tool for CI/CD or how does that work? Are there specific integrations to specific tools? Is there an API, or it abstracts it a layer above or something like that?
We built a microservices architecture. When we do we developed microservices by each category. There are 8 or 9 categories in the DevOps lifecycle. Your planning, your continuous integration, your quality, security, logging, monitoring, continuous deployment. And within that, you have various stages and various tools. What we have done is, including security scanning and Vault and a bunch of other things, we developed each category, we developed a microservice. And within which we normalize the data, normalize the schema, normalize the attributes, the API attributes, how we can connect to each of them. Within the microservice architecture, we easily, seamlessly work with prominent vendors in each of the categories. We don't really look at each tool as individual tool. We look at them as a category, how we can solve the collection of tools within the category in a seamless fashion, within which we'll be able to plug and play and drag and drop approaches and be able to construct the pipeline and through event based or through somebody can trigger the pipeline through source code level, or we can construct the pipeline across multiple clouds, because the architecture that we have allows us to extend the framework between the tools, between the clouds, and between the various categories as well.
Excellent.
Chandra, a couple of questions for you. So what's the business model here?
So we are looking at 2 aspects here, right? One is the velocity and the other is the visibility. So with velocity, the focus is more bottom up, right? So it's about how quickly can you stand up the infrastructure, choose your tools, provision them, connect them, and get developers to start creating pipelines dynamically so they can focus on what they need to do best, which is to write code and ship code. And for that we're coming up with some self-service sandbox, self-service pipelines that they can try it out as well. So to build the community engagement. And then there is the other aspect, which is visibility, right? Which is a little bit more top-down in nature, where you want to see unified metrics across different teams, across different attributes of DevOps, and also provide logs as well that are unified. You don't have to go to 15 different tools to look at logs, and you look at everything in one single portal for faster troubleshooting, minimizing MTTR, etc. So the visibility aspect reduces risk and improves or enhances audit and compliance capabilities as well. So those are the 2 different aspects we're looking to address. In terms of the business model, so there is the bottom-up aspect and top-down aspect. And then when it comes to our tool or solution of Apsara, we're looking at it from 3 aspects: the tools that you want to provision and have in the solution, and the number of pipelines or the types of pipelines, and then the analytics, which is more user-based. So that's how we are structuring Apsara, and we go to market both top-down and bottom-up aspects that I just described.
Excellent. And then is there a free or trial version or a free version or something that people can use to get a flavor and see if there's something they want?
We have a free sandbox for various types of pipelines coming up by end of October, first week of November. So we will have that in our website, and we'll also run some campaigns for that. And we will also be providing a white glove free trial version for our analytics also end of October, early November. So you should see that on our website and also through some campaigns.
Very cool. Look, there's nothing more exciting than taking the company out of stealth and launching it and seeing what people have to say. You guys, as I mentioned, have raised a seed round already. Chandra, why don't you just mention that for anyone who's interested?
Yes, we raised a seed with support from Clear Ventures, who's our lead investor for the seed, also Trinity Ventures and Firebolt. So we thank all 3 of them, Rajiv, Schwark, and Cherian, for their belief in us and supporting us. and we look forward to continuing the momentum here. Our focus right now is on generating the community engagement, releasing the free trials, and it's all about customers, right? We are working with several customers as we speak, Fortune 100, Fortune 500, and it's all about delighting them, solving their problems. And that's our focus for the next few months. And we'll continue to keep you posted as we make that progress.
Great. What's the website?
It's opsera.io, opsera.io.
.io. Fantastic. Chandra, Kumar, thank you so much for telling us about Opsera. Good luck. It's exciting. You gotta hold on to that horse and ride it, right? And see where it takes you. I'm sure it'll be a great adventure. And we look forward. Come back on and keep us posted, okay?
Absolutely, Alan. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you. So here, new company, Opsera. Check it out. It's opsera.io. And let us know what you think. Until then, this is Alan Schimmel at TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with another guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, and we're once again back. We have coming up now another edition of DevOps Unbound, which is sponsored or presented by Tricentis. This is going to be a great conversation, guys. It's outsourcing DevOps, oxymoron or truth. And our guests today are Ming Gong from UST Global. Tripping over my words there. Chris Rose from TTC, Robina Laughlin from Guardian Life, and Mitch Ashley from ASG. They're joining Alan Schimmel for this panel discussion. So let's give this one a look.
Hey everyone, I'm Alan Schimmel, and welcome to another episode of DevOps Unbound. DevOps Unbound is a series sponsored by our friends at Tricentis that explores different topics around DevOps every other week, as well as having a monthly roundtable open to the public. Today's episode is outsourcing DevOps, oxymoron or truth. I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies. And Mitchell, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
It's always awesome to be here. I'm excited about our guest today.
So am I. Let me introduce you to our guest. We have Robina. And Robina, I'm going to ask you to give your full name, title, company, background, and we're going to ask you to kick it off.
Sure. Hi, I'm happy to be here. Thank you. My name's Robina Laughlin. I work for Guardian Life Insurance, actually Guardian Life. And I have been working in the quality assurance space now for about 25 years. I've been working for Guardian for 8 years. We have a great enterprise quality assurance journey. Most recently, my department, my quality assurance department's been working with integration into a DevOps model. So we're starting that journey. We started about a year ago, and really happy to be part of the conversation.
Thank you, and thanks for joining us, Robina. Secondly, I'm going to introduce my friend Ming Gong. Ming, a little background?
Hey, Alan, how are you? It's just good, always good to be here. My name is Ming Gong, and I work for UST Global. I'm vice president. I run a practice called Digital Agility Platform and Solutions. So what we do is we provide all kinds of services and even product to our enterprise customers on things like such as DevOps transformation, DevSecOps, cloud transformation, as well as legacy modernization. So we have tons of battle scars as we're implementing DevOps for our customers.
Absolutely. And then last but certainly not least, Chris.
Hi, nice to meet everyone. So my name's Chris Rolls. I'm from a company called TTC. I'm the CEO of Americas, and what we do is we help organizations with quality engineering, continuous testing, and also agile and DevOps transformation. So really happy to be here and excited to hear what everyone else has to say.
Absolutely. So guys, when I started, so we launched DevOps.com in March 2014, working on it, all through the second half of 2013. At that time, it was sort of dogma in DevOps that DevOps wasn't about the tools. DevOps was about people. DevOps was about culture. And that therefore, to be successful in your DevOps journey, outsourcing was a no-no. You couldn't be successful and outsource your DevOps because it would destroy, you never got to the nitty-gritty of the culture. Now, that was 7-8 years ago. A lot has changed. I think we've seen some very successful the world is full of DevOps consultants, large, small, and in between, who are helping organizations along their DevOps journey. So I think we have kind of moved beyond the dogma, but if we move to truth, right? Can you successfully outsource DevOps? And if you can, what are the keys to doing it successfully? And I'm going to throw that out to our panel today, and we're going to start that as our discussion. Ming, not to pick on you, but you already mentioned you have a lot of scars to prove it.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your journey or UST's journey in this space.
Yeah, so I think you mentioned a couple of things that's really important, which is ultimately, I think, to do DevOps correctly, the whole entire delivery team needs to live and breathe the DevOps, not only the automation, the tool set, but also the processes and as well as the how you do things, or the whole mindset thing. So that's the absolutely ultimate goal. I think even over the past few years, even though all the companies all moving towards DevOps, but they are still having a lot of challenges in terms of how to take some isolated success in certain areas, trying to cascade that throughout the entire organization. And I think this is where when we talk about, hey, is outsourcing a myth or a reality? I would say it's actually somewhere in between, because it really depends on where the continuum, when I think about DevOps and think about DevOps continuum into maturity, where they are, right? For the company who's really mature, they're less likely to benefit from outsourcing. But for the folks who's just starting the journey or middle of the journey, they definitely can use some help. And not only outsourcing in general, but also what part of DevOps to outsource as well. So there's typically, when we work with the enterprise customers, they have a centralized organization, like some kind of DevOps COE, right? But they also have each individual teams that needs to be enabled. So where we found tends to be more success is when we help the kind of the COE to kind of take their info.
You are helping organizations with their transformation. Has your experience been similar, different?
Yeah, I think I'm not going to shock the world by being a consultancy who says consultants can help with DevOps transformation, right? I'd be out of business if I thought that was the case. But if I was to answer your direct question, can you outsource DevOps? I would say no, because DevOps is about a cultural change within the organization as well as the technical practices. Now, similar to what Ming is saying, it's sort of in the middle, because outsourcing and consultancies and other vendors can be a part of the solution. They can make some things more challenging in certain ways because you are introducing certain barriers, certain contractual sort of challenges around it. But it definitely can be part of it, and it definitely can help, particularly when organizations are trying to figure out how to do things better.
Yeah. Fair.
So, Robina, you look at this from 180 degrees different than Ming and Chris do, right? You're not providing consulting to organizations. You are the organization. What's your view on this?
Yeah, so it's, thanks for having me. This was a really interesting conversation. Some of my thoughts around this is, I think the important thing to understand is what's your driver to DevOps? Why are you moving to that model? Why is that model going to be important to you as an organization or as an enterprise? And when you start to answer that question, you get to different models. For us, we adopted SAFE. We started that journey 2 or 3 years ago, right? So DevOps was not the first thing we tried to conquer out of that transformation. It's on the tail end of it, and it was always on the strategic roadmap. However, what we found is that it grew organically based on the improvements from adoption of SAFE and Agile, right? So for the teams to get to the velocity that they wanted to do, it became a necessity as opposed to an aspirational goal, right? So for us, when it became that driver to success, it took on a whole different model. And then when we started figuring out how do we want to do this with our partners, right, the vendors that we work with, one of the things that we always hold true to in Guardian is that, frameworks, guardrails, models are our Guardian culture, and we develop those. We develop them in conjunction with our partners. We'll seek for collaboration, we'll seek for guidance, but the model has to come back to fit our culture, right, and how our folks work. And then once we have the guardrails in place in the operating model, inclusion of an outsourcing model is very successful, I find. But I speak from a QA perspective, and I've been on an outsourcing model now for 15 years, right? So I always kind of take the same approach to things in that if you have the operating model, the guardrails, and people know what they need and why they're doing it, then outsourcing is a good solution, but you have to have a strong backbone for the company that you're working for and with to be able to represent that model in the culture.
Mitch, Ming, go ahead, whoever, Chris.
Oh, so I think just to drill into that as well. So Robina mentioned you've got to understand your drivers with DevOps. What are you actually trying to achieve? I think that a lot of times organizations, they want to do DevOps because that's what the conferences and the experts say they should do. But also you need to understand what's your driver for outsourcing or engaging partners and other vendors, right? Mm-hmm. So if it's a cost-saving mechanism, which often it is in this economic climate, is something that people are looking at, right? That can be one component. That can be one reason for outsourcing. You could also be outsourcing to get additional expertise that you don't have internally. You could be outsourcing because you're scaling up with a whole another set of products, and there's sort of HR reasons for wanting to do that. But you need to understand those drivers. And I think another thing that Robina said crucially, which I see that organizations get wrong, is the organization who's the business, the end client for us, needs to own the cultural change and needs to own the methodology. I come back to, no, you cannot outsource DevOps. You can't buy that on a platter, right? You have to invest, you have to make the changes yourself as well.
Yeah, there's some parallels to that conversation, right? Because a long time ago, this was the conversation for quality assurance, like outsource it, there's an easy button, all your problems will be solved. I think that from the experience of that, for me, there was never an easy button. It was a lot of work, and it was a big partnership. But what we did was through that partnership, we started bringing in technology that my team hadn't had a lot of exposure to. So our options grew. And I found that there were some easy buttons along the way to build, to run tests against that build, right? So we're moving into a model now where the assets of quality assurance can be augmenting what is your DevOps model. And that model has to work for your company, right? And it has to be part of your culture. It is not something that can just kind of develop out of a box.
We probably need some precision around the term outsourcing too. So I think in this context, we're not talking about externalizing it. In other words, put it in a box, ship it somewhere, have someone else do it, give it to us when it's done, right? Because we're transforming the organization. I think it can happen a couple of ways. It can happen early in the journey. I think it also can happen, organizations typically get stuck at some point where we've gotten 2-3 teams there, but man, scaling it to a 5,000 or 10,000 person IT organization, that's hard. It's easy to do it on a startup basis. So everything to me is always driven about by what the company is about, what its DNA is like. Some companies are very data driven. We don't make a decision unless it's got, a graph attached to it or a financial analysis attached to it or tied to a strategy or whatever it is. Different companies often it's taken on the personality of the founders if it's, a younger company, but it gets established with it. And if you don't have that figured out and aligned with how you're implementing anything, Agile, DevOps, whatever it might be, you either go against the flow and fight it all the way and fail multiple times and never succeed, or you figure out what fits into the flow and the momentum, the DNA of the organization. That takes knowing people, takes knowing the organization, it takes commitment by people in the company to do it. So it's not an outsourced give away the problem. It's I need help because I need expertise, because I'm stuck, because there's other things. There's things we don't know what we don't know. And we're looking to get smart from other people. And we want you to leave someday and help us operate on our own, maybe help us with a different problem someday. But that's kind of our goal as an organization.
Yeah, Mitchell, I fully agree with that. And we certainly have a couple of points you point out is pretty interesting. One is the challenge that we're seeing for large enterprise customers. They usually have problem with cascading kind of DevOps excellence across the organization, right? But there's so many hurdles, I would say. One of them is organization silos. We have seen so many times where you have one division, usually on the digital side, right, front end. They have great success because their technology stacks tend to be more modern, so it's easier to get on the DevOps train. But then once you start trying to cascade to the legacy side, it just doesn't work because either because they don't share very well because there's organization silos, or because the technology stack they develop doesn't really work on the other side. So where we see, again, I know your term about outsourcing can mean many different things, but where we see a lot of support or at least success is when we help these kind of organization where they have a COE, right, where they establish standards, and I think Ravina kind of mentioned this too. It's very important for a company to really establish their true north, the compass, right, in terms of the guardrails and things like that. But it's also very important to not have a very heavy central organization either to try to drive DevOps, because then you're missing out on all the distributed innovation happening on the ground level. So you can never respond fast enough. So this is why when we create our kind of a model, we usually have a team or a very small team help with the COE side of it to help them kind of develop their whole community, right? The culture, things like that. But then we have very nimble kind of we call it DPOD. It's like a 5-member crew, right? They have consists of DevOps architect and a couple of engineers. And what they do is they will be kind of parachuted into an area within the enterprise where they need a lot of help, or the application that they're using is very critical to the business. We'll drop in there, not only helping with engineering, figure out the tech stacks and figure out the DevOps, all the different nuances of it, but we also do a lot of coaching to make sure we can train the team to become self-reliant. That once they are, we lift the team up, then we drop into the next, the deeper into the next area where they need help. So this is kind of the hybrid model is where we find more success.
I'm really curious who typically brings in like your firm, meaning your firm, Chris, maybe Robina, who brought in someone to bring in help with DevOps. Is that at a very high level? Is it a development team level? I'm thinking larger organizations here.
Yeah, I think Chris and I probably share this. I think Chris and I are probably going to share the same answer, which is all of the above. I mean, we have a large DevOps engagement where the CIO invites us in, and we operate starting from strategy level all the way down to the individual team level. But then we also have through relationships or whatever case might be, where we insert ourselves into a particular team to help them, then grow from there, right?
Yeah.
Chris? Yeah,
exactly the same. And if it's okay, I want to go back to one thing you guys said before, which is having a bit of precision around what we mean by outsourcing. Because I think when I see this topic, I jump to full functional outsourcing of QA or Dev or Ops, right? But the reality is outsourcing also exists on a spectrum. When you hire a maid to clean your house or to service your car or anything like that, you are outsourcing that function of your personal life. And it's the same with software development, right? So there's the really far down this end where it's just you have a consultant who's embedded in a project team, and then there's all the way down to the far end where you do that full-scale outsourcing of a function or a department. And what I want to be clear on is the further you get along that continuum, the harder it is, right? You have to be far more careful about it. And so that's something that's really important. And to go back to the question that was just asked, completely the same. Sometimes, and you're very happy when the CIO or the CEO says, come in and help me do this transformation across the organization. Sometimes it is a QA or dev manager has a specific problem that they want to solve. But I'd also be really interested to hear Robina's thoughts.
Yeah.
So how did we bring, I'm sorry, can we?
What level did you bring? Was it the CIO brought in somebody to help you?
Oh,
with
sure.
Or was it on a QA development team? How did you start down the getting external help, outsourcing help?
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a parallel run to a DevOps model. So from a QA perspective, what we did was we decided to centralize our enterprise quality assurance organization. And when we did that, certainly we got economies of scale, but I needed a partner or a vendor that would come and work with me. And when I say partner, I truly mean it. Like, we have team meetings and they're all folks that work for me. I don't distinguish. So you have to be able to have that relationship, I think, to be able to get success out of outsourcing, if you want to call it that, because it's really partnershiping in my mind. So that was the journey that we took, and now that's been underway now for almost 8 years. So we have an incredible wealth of assets behind us, and I started stopping and looking at what my partners were doing on the other side of building and deploying, and how are they verifying that build. And we've been moving this shift left journey of discovery of quality issues for a long, long time now. And we're at the point where we're in the build stage. And I'm like, well, we have great assets that could help verify that a build's going to work. What's the next solution to that? So I reached out to my Cognizant folks under my QA umbrella and said, hey, if we were to think about extending our assets use, what would we do? And they were like, well, turn to your DevOps team, turn to your build and deployment team. Let's understand what they're doing. They're using Jenkins, they're using Bitbucket, example for us. So when we started looking at being able to scale our assets and use them across the enterprise, we built them in Jenkins. We built our actual Selenium code in Bitbucket. So now we have the hooks there, and we can, as these teams start to catch up, or we start to catch up, and we meet in the middle, we then have a problem we're trying to solve. We are getting builds, they are broken, or when they pass, there's quality issues. Can we discover them through automation, right? So that's that easy button. And in this case, I actually do have the easy button, right? I have this regression suite. I can slim it down to a smoke test or something and say, if we can deploy this and do all of this, then yes, we can get those results. And then the next phase of it is accountability of teams of what they're going to do with those results. So none of that is technical. That's all cultural, right? Except for the hooks in what we built. So that's kind of been our journey, and that's where I'm looking to go strategically.
Excellent. So, guys, I want to bring us down we touched on it already, but I want to clarify it. Ming and Chris, you're in a unique position in that you guys get to see dozens of organizations and how they approach this problem. Where Robina, your view is Guardian based, right? This is what you guys have done at Guardian. Here at DevOps.com, I'm also in a cat's bird seat in that I get to speak to many people like Ming and Chris, but I also get to speak to many people like Robina. I get to speak to people like Mitchell. I literally get hundreds of views on this. And, I recognize patterns. And that's, what do I do? What's my superhero power? I'm good at recognizing patterns. I guess I'm a machine learner. But anyway, there usually is a pattern along DevOps adoption, and it's similar to what Robina mentioned, which is, when I first launched DevOps.com, our tagline was DevOps picks up where Agile leaves off, right? Because what happened was people were moving to Agile, development processes, probably, going on 20 years now, right? Agile's been around 20 years. And it was great from the it makes you feel old, I'm sorry, Robina, but yeah, it's 20 years. don't feel bad. I watched this Halt and Catch Fire about the birth of the PC industry. Yes, that's what it is. You're in, Einstein's theory of relativity.
I remember my agile training with Ken. I can't imagine 20 years ago.
Yeah, Ken, who's now, of course, is Scrum.org, right? And versus Scrum, the other one. Anyway, not here to get into that one. That's another rat's nest.
Different podcast.
But but the thing is, the normal course, if you will, is we do some agile. Whether it's Scrum or Safe or whatever, we're seeing out there scale, and then. We want to start getting into some lean IT stuff. And of course, when you start marrying agile and lean, it's DevOps, right? That's what DevOps is, right? And now we're going to get into CI/CD pipelines. And of course, it's grown since then. We've added SRE on. Continuous testing has become huge, right? Just a huge piece of this. And, so we've seen the sprawl, the urban sprawl of DevOps and Agile over the last 20 years. Along with it, I think it's become all but impossible to do at a large organizational scale, at a large enterprise scale, without some outside help. I think, we've recognized the enemy. It's us. We've created the need in our large organizations, the way we go about adopting these things, that we can't do it without outside help.
And it's very true, Alan. And I think that's why you really need the outside help, and you need to go to the experts, because no one size fits all. No one tool solves everything. That's how I got involved with Tricentis. Was I went out really early looking for a vendor that would grow with me and was on the same aspirational journey that I was, right? So that's where I think it really helps in terms of consulting. You need to pick the partner that's going to work with you and grow with you, and sees you for your uniqueness, not an industry standard.
That's right.
Fair. Chris, Ming?
I think, you can't take a single pattern of technical practices or cultural adoption and apply it to every single organization. So that point, Robina, about making sure that you tailor it for the organizations that you're working with, or even within an organization, the different departments, the different products that you're working with, right? There's a different sort of cultural mode within the digital section versus the enterprise technology section, right? So that's really important. And I think that also kind of comes to the thing that I see that often people get wrong when they do outsourcing, is that they don't align the incentives properly. Because to face it, we all have different incentives, right? Even Robina, if I was partnering with you and we want to work as really good partners, then I have a slightly different set of incentives, right, to grow my company as Guardian does, right? And so we have to find ways to align those incentives. Otherwise, you'll create a conflict, a cultural conflict, which prevents you from really going as fast as you can. So that's just something that I see often people get wrong about moving to DevOps, because they have to use outsourcing, in particular, engaging firms to help them with that.
I want to go back to the point Alan was talking about in terms of the massive talent shortage in an industry, and it's not just DevOps, it's cloud, everything else, right? I mean, just in general, I think we all wish there's more qualified folks who has those technical skills, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of our customers want some help from us, because they simply cannot find enough talent out there that not only knows the DevOps technology, but also have the ability to keep up with the crazy change in the industry, right? I mean, you see a massive change even within the last couple of years, where used to be all just all the siloed best of breed product, like Jenkins or whatever else, then Artifactory, whatever. But now you see a trend where industry is moving towards more of a kind of end-to-end, all-in-one type of tools, right? For example, you have the Azure DevOps, you have the, GitLab, they start offering the whole suite of things, because they recognize the massive talent shortage. You can't take care of the problem until you can also solve the problem on the technology side as well. So that's kind of an approach that we're taking as well, where not only we have on people's side, we have the RD pods kind of coaching the team so we can get lots and lots of teams to train up to be self-reliant. But on the other side, we also develop on platform to kind of try to abstract all the complexity of DevOps from the user, so the user doesn't have to be an expert. So we call it democratizing DevOps for everyone, right? So I think for a company to be successful, you need to kind of take an approach of kind of both people and the tools combination.
Absolutely.
To that point, kind of share a personal story in my initial adoption of DevOps when I was a CIO at a company. And it was initiated by me because actually Alan had reached out to me and said, "Hey, Mitchell, there's this thing called DevOps. You got to go read about it." I'm like, "Okay, what is it?" I'll go figure it out. I got hooked onto it. But the rest of the team hadn't really caught fire yet of getting on to DevOps. And so as a leader of an organization, it's tough to say, okay, I want us to go this direction. I think this is really be helpful for us when the team's not there yet, right? And really understanding what it's going to take to get the organization going and get behind it and how to be successful at it. This is earlier, so you reach out more to individuals, right, that have started to build some brand and some experience in doing things like DevOps. Today, I would go to a different kind of a team to say, here's where we are, here's the projects that we have going on, here's how we're kind of what we're being asked to do, right? I think maybe not true, but it seems like most IT organizations are always being asked to transform some way, somehow.
Yep.
And sometimes, pretty radically. And if you can sort of set where we're headed and tie it to the why, as you talked about, Rabina, the why for the business, though, not for IT, that seemed to me to be the biggest thing that everybody could rally around. Not that it was DevOps or Agile or it was this. It was, we want to go after this market. And our ability to get there is really constrained today. And let's figure out some ways we can go after that. And that tended to rally around. So I think today, I guess my point is, today we're at a point where we can hire more expertise. And we want to de-risk our journey and learn from others. We don't have to figure it all out ourselves and be the smartest person in the room. Certainly I don't. And that's a great environment to be able to bring in help.
Mm-hmm.
Rabina, I'd like to throw out, there was a time where we used to look at quote unquote outsourcing and consultants, and one of the terms that was thrown around was body shop, right? I bring in some bodies, I'm going to rent some bodies. I remember when Mitchell and I were at Still Secure, we'd go down to like federal government, we had a big federal practice, and we'd go to a federal facility, whether it's a lab or a NOC or what have you. 80% of the people there were not federal employees. They worked for Grumman, Northrop, or SAIC, or take your pick of the Beltway bandits, right? But it was all body shop, right? And when you'd speak to the salespeople at these consultants, you'd say, "How's business?" I got 50 people placed, right? Not what the mission was, what the tools were, They judge their success by how many people they had placed. I like to think, and maybe I'm naive, Rabina, I'm going to ask you, that we don't judge the success of our DevOps outsourcing by how many bodies I've got buried at a given location. And because I think that's a terrible metric to determine the success of a transformation.
Yeah, so that's a great observation, Alan. You just kind of gave me shivers when you talked about, number of bodies. I remember those days, and they're painful to look back on, honestly. There was a time where you needed an army of folks to do things, and I don't necessarily think that's the case now. For me, our journey was I needed a partner, right? And I needed someone that was going to come here and work with me. And through that partnership, I also needed to know that I was going to have a 24/7 shop, and that's going to necessitate overlap on both sides, right? You're onshore and you're offshore. So I don't think you can ever just kind of set it, forget it, and throw it away to an offshore team. That's just not how it works. And I think the other piece of it is at the very source of it, you have to remember that these are human beings. They have families, they have lives. They want to do good work just as much as we want to do good work. And the way that they're going to feel that contribution is being part of the team. And the way they're going to feel that sense of that is by being present. And we actually flip the dynamics. So we're no longer a headcount shop, we're an outcome shop, right? So I measure the success of my organization by the outcome of our testing. And for me, with my partner, if they do it with 2 people or 200, that's their discretion. So I don't have to get into any more of these conversations of we need 2 more bodies here, we need 8 more bodies there, I'm anticipating 12 bodies. That just turns into, I think, an empty use of really valuable strategic time that you have with your partner, and you should be using it a little bit more productively, right? So that's how I flip that dynamic. And I'd be very curious to see how Mitch and Ming feel about it. And Chris.
Yeah, well, my first reaction was I thought you were going to talk about Sopranos or something. Like a whole different kind of.
Bada bing. Yeah.
I really like how Rubina described it, because it isn't about budget size and all of those kind of backwards metrics, and I'm sure they're still used today. To me, that's a measure of how aligned you are with the business. If you've shed the financial size, the IT only centric metrics to what are we making an impact? There are a lot of ways we can do a digital transformation project. We could get to contactless services, let's say, something very relevant today. And it doesn't have to be with hiring 50 more people, because we're probably never going to find 50 people to hire anyway, right? So we've got to find other ways to do it. There are times where I need these people to fill these roles. And I'm sure, the body shop approach still applies in some situations. I doubt it on strategic projects, though. That would be my supposition.
Chris and Ming, I'd like to hear from you guys on it, though, because you're on the other side of the equation here. Chris?
I hate the term body shopping, right?
Yes.
Terrible term. And I talk to the team and I say, we have to have stamped on our forehead, we are not a body shop. Because if you're going in there and your goal as account manager is to get 50 people on an engagement, you're not thinking about what that organization needs. You're not thinking about what the business outcomes are. You're just thinking, I can make 10, 15, whatever, how many dollars it is off each person, and what's my commission for that? That's a terrible way to think about it. And what's more, it shows an outdated way of thinking about the people who are going to do this work. People, process, technology, people in my mind being the most important part. If you're thinking of them and you're calling them resources, which sometimes we all slip into, or you're calling them bodies, right? Look, it's not just a warm body in a seat typing some code or testing some software or monitoring the systems, right? There are people who have skills, who are thinking about things, who are trying to do the best work they can to deliver outcomes for the company. And so I hate that term body shop. I hope that no one associates that with me and my company. And I think it's a terrible way to think about, delivering software.
Yeah, so I definitely second that. Rubina just articulated is pretty much what echoes pretty much all of our enterprise customers has said. They absolutely transition from, where it's just T&M type of model before now to it's all about outcome based, and that's what we prefer as well. To Rubina's point, why the customer should care how we deliver it, as long as the outcome is what they want, right? We actually created a digital agility transformation manifesto in honor of Agile Manifesto. And one of the top one is actually called value over volume, which is exactly what, Alan, you just talked about in terms of, hey, you should not be measuring successful transformation by the volume of things got done, but it's more about the value, right? So in this case, instead of measuring, hey, how many DevOps, like for example, how many DevOps pipeline do we create? That's not important. What's important is how much faster are we able to help the team to develop deliver software to the production faster, right? What's the frequency increase, right? So it's those things are what matters. So that's what we absolutely focus on.
Excellent. Guys, we've got maybe 7 or 8 minutes, and there's one area we haven't hit on yet that we'd be kind of negligent if we didn't hit on it. And that is, what effect has COVID had on all of this, right? On one level, we could say, well, look, everyone's working remotely anyway. What difference does it make it, if they're an employee or an outsourcer, we're all remote. We're all equal in that regard. The other way is, how do I graft these people into our culture? How do we make them part of the team when we've never shook hands in person? When the only way I ever see you is on a Brady Bunch Zoom window here, and you take the top left, right? Can we really integrate in just remote only settings? And Ming, Chris, you guys deal with it. You're dealing with it over and over again. Robina, you are too, right? Everyone's remote. How has COVID helped, hurt, hindered, accelerated? How's it affected this?
So I think one thing is that, if we ask people 5 years ago, how do you do Agile, how do you DevOps, you'd say everyone has to be in the same room, they have to be co-located, you've got to have stickies up on the wall.
Chris is kind of sticking on us here. Okay. Good, Chris, I'm sorry. You kind of hung on us. We got stickies on the wall.
Yeah, so I was saying, in the past, people would say you have to have everyone in the same room, stickies on the wall, and that's the only way you can do Agile and DevOps. And I think one thing that has been good with COVID is that it has dissuaded us of that illusion that that is the only way to do things, because we have been forced to do it differently. That being said, it is so much harder to create culture, whether it's in-house or whether it's outsourced, when you don't have that face-to-face collaboration. There's only so many times people can do a virtual happy hour and still really get into it. So you have to be creative. Yeah, I'm sure everyone's had that the first time. Everyone's like, man, we're having 5 happy hours a week. I've got my bottle right next to me. And then you're 2 months in and you're saying, geez, I cannot do this anymore, right? I just want to go to bed or watch Sopranos, right? But I think that we really need to focus on that, building that culture, and come up with creative ways to create connections between people.
Yeah. Agreed. Ming?
Well, let me see. Hold on. Give me a sec.
Okay. You go to your happy hour background?
Absolutely. So, so what you're just seeing here is my family and I, we took a hike recently to a Malibu beach. And this is I took a 30 seconds video of the Malibu, right, and use that as my background. So this is one of the things that I started asking my team to do, trying to personalize this kind of virtual experience, right? I'm a absolutely people person, so I miss the in-person, bonding dearly. But in lieu of that, we basically, every time we have team meetings or with our customers or with our own team, we pretty much strongly encourage everyone to get on the video, and so at least we can see each other, right? But to Chris's point, there's always silver lining to everything, because the COVID certainly forced or speed up a lot of things. That's what's going to happen anyways. So to that, I think it's a positive thing. Ravina, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. What a year we're all having, huh? Surprise.
Yeah.
So I think, in terms of working with your partners through COVID, and we've been talking a lot about culture, I think one of the foundation things is to pick a company or a partner that has a very similar culture to you, right? So then you're not trying to find middle ground in that, and that should really be a big part of your selection process. You need to be comfortable with the folks that you work with, and you need to be living kind of to the same standards, I think. So for me, how COVID affected me was, while we were all scrambling to get ourselves home and reaping the benefits of a long-term plan to be able to have a remote workforce. We learned that through Sandy a long time ago when we had done a lot of changes. I was also working really closely with Cognizant and helping to get all the resources that they needed to get my folks home and offshore, right? So I was as concerned about offshore as I was concerned about onshore. And now to this day, my job is actually pretty high touch now, and the reason being that we're so far along. I have people that are really overworking themselves, and I think that, I don't know that it's deadlines as it is, take pride in craftsmanship in their home, and they want to, this is something for them to do, or it's a stress release in a really challenging time where everything's unpredictable. But I spend more of my time saying, when was the last time you took a day off? When was the last time you took an afternoon off? Right? You need to recharge, you need to gather yourself, and that's for offshore too. So that's been my challenge this year.
Yeah.
Fair. Mitchell, I know you guys at Accelerated Strategies Group did a study on the whole remote thing and COVID. Thoughts?
Yeah, boy, I could talk for an hour on this, but I'll just point out a couple things, and I'll point folks to the report. We looked at software developers already know how to work remotely, right? Many do. And so how has that affected them? How has COVID and the work from home affected them, and how have they kind of affected the organization? So interestingly enough, across the board, there's about 350 participants. Across the board, everyone is above 60% of who have accelerated digital transformation projects, contacted new forms of delivery, and automation. But what I really found interesting was that how influential DevOps practices, whether you called it DevOps or not, had start to infiltrate into the organization. So I'm talking about things like doing daily stand-up meetings or more cross-functional teams, increased use of that, asynchronous communications like a Slack or a team, as opposed to being on a phone call or in a meeting. So there's all these ways of working that as we were talking before, it sort of forced everybody into it. And the teams that had really good software teams working remotely jumped on board. And we saw an increase in the use of that kind of style of work, sometimes facilitated by tools, sometimes just process. Mm-hmm. So if you want to read the whole report, and reading is minimal, it's all infographics, so it's really super easy to consume. Go to accelst.com, and it's free to download and enjoy. And let me know if you have questions. Love to talk to you about it.
Awesome.
Excellent. Guys, we are out of time. We're actually over time. Robina, Ming, Chris, I want to thank you, all of you, for joining with us today. This was a great discussion. In the show notes, production notes, we will have links to your websites and any other links you want to put in there. But, all three of you are dealing in the real world with real problems that we're seeing today, and helping organizations solve them, right? Whether it's your own organization or other organizations. So keep up the great work. We may revisit this topic on DevOps Unbound someday, and we'd love to have you back on here. Okay?
Pleasure.
Thank you so much. All right, Robina, you're in.
It's nice to meet you guys. Good luck. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Mitch, thanks as always, man. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps Unbound. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on another DevOps Unbound real soon.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here with the Monday edition of the news headlines. Over on DevOps.com, we have an article that looks at data storage in the age of DevOps. As we all know, data is the new currency in today's digital environment, and companies have a lot of it. The cloud seemed like a great place to store and manage all of the data, and it is. But the costs of maintaining all that data in the cloud have been an expensive fix. What is needed is a cloud strategy that focuses on the ability to only pay for the space needed at any given time without the worry of additional fees for accessing archived data. This bottomless approach to cloud will enable more innovation via the cloud without the high cost of holding on to all that data. We also have an article that focuses on DevSecOps in the mid-market space. Many organizations have successfully introduced security into their DevOps pipelines and processes, which is good, but it can be especially difficult for the mid-market, which is an AppSec desert. Most AppSec technologies are geared for large enterprises with lots of expertise in-house. Mid-market companies don't have the resources or the experts to manage AppSec effectively. The article explores how organizations in the mid-market can effectively add security to their DevOps pipelines and offers tips on finding the right type of solution to make it happen. In news, we have Harness, which announced its plans to release a module that leverages machine learning algorithms to optimize build and test cycles on the Harness CI Enterprise platform, and a continuous features module to enable DevOps teams to employ feature flagging to simplify the application deployment process. These two new features are significant in different ways. AI is poised to change the DevOps landscape, enabling teams to release code faster, and feature flags have been proven to be useful in helping teams push out new releases and updates iteratively, easy for me to say, for a better overall user experience. Harness plans to add more AI more broadly to its portfolio to push the limits of DevOps teams even further. On Container Journal, Verizon Business has launched a managed service through which IT teams can employ applications on Kubernetes clusters residing at the network edge as well as the public cloud. This signals a next step in the evolution of adoption of Kubernetes. The company says the new service makes it possible for IT teams to deploy applications without having to master all the nuances of networking environments. With the rise of edge computing in particular, IT teams are looking for means to deploy applications that allow them to co-manage the environment alongside a managed services provider, which would automate the management of all the associated IT infrastructure. And Diamante has launched a data plane management platform for hybrid cloud computing environments that marries storage management to a container networking overlay. With this technology, Diamante is seizing on what it sees as an opportunity to provide a platform that makes it easier to centralize the management of networking and storage services for Kubernetes clusters that are deployed in public clouds, local data centers, and edge computing environments. Over on Security Boulevard, we have an article that talks about protecting online learning environments. The fall semester is in full swing in schools K through 12 through college, and vast numbers of students are doing their learning at home. Schools should be technologically in a better place than they were in March at the start of the quarantine, but security still lags in some areas. This article takes a look at 5 ways that online learning, the online learning experience can be better protected, and some of them are pretty elementary. See what I did there? And we have an article that looks at the potential benefits of having a vendor access management system in the cloud. Traditionally these systems have resided inside the corporate network, but as edge computing and the cloud have pushed the perimeter well beyond the 4 walls of the companies, more enterprise resources are actually being pushed into the cloud. So the vendor access management system obviously is no different and can actually provide more benefits in the cloud than on premises. This article discusses the pros and cons of having a vendor management system in the cloud to help organizations decide whether it's the right choice for them, especially as third-party risks is a growing concern. All right, that's all I have for headlines today. Check back tomorrow. We'll have some more freshly baked headlines for you. Till then, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I am now here with Maxime Fatiev, who is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Temporal. Maxime, thank you very much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So I want to talk to you about your company because I understand you guys just were awarded some funding, and I'd like to know more about your it's a microservices orchestration platform. Am I correct in that?
Correct.
Okay, great. So tell me a little bit about the funding, first of all, and what you guys plan to use the money for.
So we actually announced 2 rounds of funding. We started company exactly a year ago in last October. And in November, we received the first round of funding. It was, I think, $6.75 million from Amplify, and it was a round led by Amplify Partners. And what happened is due to COVID, we told our partners when the whole thing started that we are going to slow down hiring. And because we had enough money to go for a few years, but we were told that economy can get really bad. And we practically told that we are going to slow down hiring, and the response was that it's not the right thing to do, that we have a great product and we have great customers, and at this time we need to lean in. And we practically just started receiving term sheets. And we ended up with a round, which we ended up going with Sequoia as our partner. And but that wasn't expected really, because we were a 7 company at that point only, and so far we raised $25 million. But we took this money because we thought that it would really help us to build a great company.
Excellent, excellent. So tell me about your technology. What are you guys building, and what are the pain points that you guys are addressing with it?
So I and my co-founder Samar, we have long history of working with distributed systems. I spent 8.5 years at Amazon. I worked at Google, Microsoft. He worked at Microsoft, and then we worked at Uber. And I was tech lead for SQL workflow service, which is AWS service. So I have kind of long history of building distributed systems. And we interacted with a lot of teams, with a lot of products, with a lot of applications. And we found that, like especially Amazon was one of the first move into the microservice world, even like in the beginning of 2000s. And we quickly learned that the existing ways to orchestrate microservices and build systems out there are not really developer friendly. The problem is that microservices work okay if you have short-lived requests and you don't care about results, like if they are lost. If you press a button and then you get error back, it's okay, or because you call and it's short-lived. But if you do something which actually requires resiliency and requires completion, for example, money transaction or fulfilling an order, or practically everything which you cannot lose if your computer goes down, there is no good way to build these applications even now. And this is exactly the problem we are trying to solve. We want to simplify the model of building these distributed applications for resilient distributed applications.
All right.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, I can just give some history. We we joined Uber 5 years ago, me and my co-founder Samar. And at Uber was growing through very high growth phase back then. It was growing, I don't know how many percent, like a few times per year, probably. And it switched to microservice architecture from its monolith. And we kind of saw that problem, and we built this solution to help our teams. And within 3 years, absolutely organically, with bottoms up, it grew up to like more than 100 teams using that for all sort of business level and different types of applications within Uber. And as it was open source solution, that also started to pick up external adoption by companies like HashiCorp, Box, Checker, and then in like last October we decided to start a company, because we kind of felt that the only way to actually serve the broader open source community was having its own company driving that product. And now we are kind of building this Temporal as an open source project, MIT license, so it's available for everyone to run for free, and we are driving that forward, that project.
Okay. All right. Great. So one of the things that, I've talked with a number of companies about regarding microservices is it's the complexity of it, because there are so many moving parts, basically. It can be really, really difficult to manage. So, but it is obviously a boon to application development in that, it does offer that flexibility, if you will, that, you don't have to deal with a big monolith but I guess I'm wondering, with all this complexity, why haven't solutions like this come around sooner? I mean, what was holding companies back?
There are a lot of attempts. All right, so it's not that. And again, I think we want to separate two separate things, because you said manage. There are a lot of effort the last 20 years was spent in actually managing the deployment of microservices, practically how you manage, like infrastructure management, right? We've got VMs, then we've got EC2 and AWS and like other cloud providers. Then we've got Docker. Then we've got like now we talk about Kubernetes and serverless. But think about it; they don't solve the way applications are written. All they solve is how to deploy and manage the infrastructure. And the application developers actually got their life got worse because monolith is actually easy to program. Monolith gives you a lot of ability, especially if you use a single database, you get a lot of benefits from that. And moving to microservices, yes, we solved the orchestration problem of my container orchestration problem, but we didn't solve the microservice orchestration problem because they still need to code and call all these unreliable services, and it's actually pretty hard to kind of, it's like on burden of the developer. Every application developer right now, most of their time spend actually making their services reliable. And this is exactly what we are trying to solve. We want to give them this reliability out of the box. And there are not that many applications. Right now, it's all ad hoc. Practically developer, okay, I need to make it reliable. I don't want to go down. I need to save my state to database. I need to save my state to the queue. I need to have queuing. I need to have retries. All of that is not reusable. People kind of invent and reinvent this architecture all the time. And they're practically giving a high-level abstraction model when they can practically just write the application, and we take care of all the kind of infrastructure-type failures, and we reconstruct the state of the application on the fly. Like I think one comparison I give for non-technical users is that imagine the world before when we had Microsoft Word, and you would type in, and then it crashes, and you didn't press the save button, you lost your state. And all developers right now, what they're doing is most of their code is practically open the document, type one word in it, and close the document. Then you need to type another word. You would open the document, type one word, close the document. And they're in this cycle all the time because code is scared to lose the state all the time. So it has to kind of press this save button all the time. And then we move to Google Docs. And Google Docs was revolutionary because there is no even save button there. You just type the document in, and it's there. And then your computer crashes. You don't care, it's there. And then you lose the hard drive. Nobody cares, it's there. And we do exactly the same with the code. Your code shouldn't even think about losing state because we make it virtual. Kind of the way it is that if your infrastructure crashes, the code is still in exactly the same state, including local variables, threads, everything. It just we reconstruct the code in exactly the same state. And it simplifies the life of programmers big time.
That is really, really fascinating. I hadn't even actually thought about it that way. So yeah, the fact that you guys are making this available to the open source community, what made you guys kind of go that route rather than going proprietary?
I think because in my opinion, any developer platform which targets developers cannot be successful these days if it's proprietary, just by definition, because we are changing the way people think about software. We're changing about the way people design their applications. And these days, anything which touches developers on such a deep level cannot be just closed source. There is no way around that. So it's just, I think, very practical reasons for that. And we believe that this is very widely applicable to practically almost every developer out there. That's why we think it should be open source, should be in every possible language. Because we can use just programming. We don't introduce any levels of abstraction. You just write your code in your preferred language. Now we support Go and Java. In the future, we are going to support SDKs in Python, Node.js, whatever, like TypeScript, and whatever languages people prefer. I think there is Ruby client contributed by our friends at Coinbase, and we will have other languages. But the idea is that it should be open source. And in general, I think open source, these days, if you're building any infrastructure level middleware, kind of like we are doing, it should be open source to be successful. I think the world has changed. Building these new infrastructure components not being open source, just it's not possible these days.
Yeah, there are so many ways that open source is being used in software development these days. I mean, you're absolutely right. It just makes total sense. Beyond just having a larger audience to consume it. It's I think it helps the community as a whole. So what are you guys thinking about for future iterations of this technology?
Oh, there are a lot of plans, but right now we're kind of focusing on shorter term. So one thing is that the way it's done, that there is backend service, which keeps all the state transitions, state machine, queuing. It does all the hard distributed system stuff. And so we hide all this complexity, but it should exist somewhere. And that service right now, as it's open source, you have to run yourself. Practically every company needs to give developers SDKs to build their applications, but then they also need to run this backend component. And what we are doing right now, we are going to provide hosted solution, which in the cloud, that means that the developers don't need to run it themselves, or even like big companies. The idea would be that they use our SDKs, develop that, then use our hosted solution. So it will eliminate a lot of friction in the adoption. That is kind of our main idea in terms of how we're going to make money as a company. And then at the same time, we obviously want to grow the kind of feature set of the open source solution itself. And again, as I mentioned, one thing is obviously adding more programming languages support. Mm-hmm. We want to be supported in every major language. Actually, I forgot to mention PHP. We actually have our friends from Belarus working right now on the PHP SDK. And then we also have a lot of ideas about different type of features. And most obvious ones is security. Right now, our solution is not doesn't contain a lot of features around security out of the box. You have to write some code. We want to make sure that we're fully integrated with like all the security features. Also, we run on top of existing databases. We don't use our own persistence. So right now we support MySQL and Cassandra out of the box. And the idea is to add, we actually are finishing up Postgres integration, but we want to add more databases. Practically, we want to say, bring your own database, because we know that enterprises hate bringing new databases, new storage engines into the mix. So we can practically tell, okay, if you're using whatever database you're using, SQL Server, Oracle, whatever, we would be able to run on top of that in the future.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Maxon, thank you very much for walking me through the technology. Congratulations on your latest round of funding, and the technology sounds amazing. So thank you so much for walking me through it. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Great. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the Monday edition of the Webinars Preview. As always, we have a number of great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Coming up now are 3 that are happening this week I thought you should know about. Actually, all 3 of them are happening tomorrow, October 27th. So please check your calendar. Hopefully we can find some open time for you to attend 1 or 2 or maybe even all 3 of them. The first webinar I want to let you know about is called More Than Monitoring: How Observability Takes You from Firefighting to Fire Prevention. It is happening starting at 8 a.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard, and it is sponsored by Splunk. This webinar takes a look at the differences between observability and monitoring, which is often confused among a lot of people and a lot of organizations, and also takes a look at why it is a bigger challenge in multi-cloud and containerized worlds. The webinar also will discuss how observability results in less firefighting and more fire prevention, and how new platforms can help gain observability for on-premises and in the cloud, for containers, microservices, and even SAP or mainframe environments. The second webinar is called Measure Customer Value with Self-Service Observability. This one is happening, as I said, Tuesday, October 27th. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, and it is sponsored by MoveSoft. In this panel discussion, it's actually a fireside chat discussion. I'm moderating between Adam Frank, who is the VP of Product and Design at MoveSoft, and Helen Beal, who is Chief Ambassador with DevOps Institute. We're going to be talking about how self-service observability can help organizations focus their time on delivering value that customers want and spend less time trying to deal with issues that come up here and there. So going to be a great discussion. I'm really excited for that webinar, so hopefully you can join me for that one. The last webinar on today's lineup is called Deploying, Monitoring, and Securing Applications for Kubernetes. This one is happening at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's sponsored by Shippa. It's a great topic and a great webinar that focuses on the value that an application management framework can bring to Kubernetes environments in helping to improve the developer experience. You know, developers, as organizations increasingly adopt Kubernetes environments, they're dealing with a whole lot more of the infrastructure-related components to deploy and manage their applications. So that is becoming an increasingly complex environment for them. So this webinar takes a look at how the application management framework can actually help them in their quest to actually be able to sleep at night and get their jobs done without messing up their minds and the rest of their days. So hopefully we can get everybody joining us for that webinar as well. It's going to be a good one. As I said, it's happening at 3 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday on DevOps.com. All right, that's it for the Monday edition of the webinars preview. Please check back tomorrow. I'll have a fresh batch of webinars for you. And until then, stay safe, and I'll see you then. All right, welcome back, everybody. Coming up next, we have Mitch Ashley's regular Analyst Corner segment. And then after that, he's got a great conversation with Narinder Maken, who is the CEO of HealthPer. So let's give that a look.
Welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO of the Accelerated Strategies Group. It's been really interesting to see the progression of activities, kind of the flow. I'm not a VC, but there's sort of a deal flow of inquiries that come into an analyst company from different organizations reaching out. Sometimes it's their PR organization. Sometimes it's the companies directly. And I've been contacted by a couple of entrepreneurial ventures. Both of them in the hardware space. One of them we're going to feature today is focused on, so how do you tie in some of the testing that we need to do around coronavirus and COVID-19 with some other technology. And had another person who I'll bring on to TechStrong TV for a discussion about some edge computing, high throughput data networking kinds of technology. Layered on top with AI and some other kind of a platform for applications. So people are really innovating all around the cloud. It's not just the cloud itself, it's what can be done at the edge, maybe what's better done at the edge, and keeping the hardware part of it alive. Now, there's software to all of this, of course, as well. But innovating with either new hardware or packaging of that with some compelling use cases. So hope you enjoy the video that we have today. I appreciate your feedback on it. Always happy to hear from you. You can reach me at mitchell@accelst.com. Thank you for watching.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I'm pleased to be joined by Narinder Maken, who is CEO with HealthPer. Welcome, Narinder. It's good to be talking with you today.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you for taking the time.
You bet. Narinder, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about your company, HealthPer.
So, Mitch, I'm a technologist. Like all my life, worked in different technologies, big corporations, small companies, done multiple startups. And HealthPer, what we ended up with is an IT technology consulting and services company, but our focus is on health and safety. We have many managed services, and our recent thing with all things that are going on in the current situation is in health IoT devices market. We do offer turnkey well-being programs and solutions, which pretty much are creating tailored experiences for workplace wellness employees or other types of institutions who need those type of services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the contactless, of course, is a big thing with COVID that's been brought out. Just as a total aside, it seems in the last 3 days, I'm being pummeled with green screens you can set behind your chair so you can do a virtual background. You know, every week it's a new kind of wave of a new product, and I know you've been working a lot in thinking about this kind of contactless problem and some unique ways of solving that. So I'd love to hear what you're working on and kind of where you're headed with it.
You're absolutely right. Like employers have been looking out for solutions, whether it is contact tracing solution, temperature screening, or having COVID-19 health screening, and which differs by pretty much every state organization. They have their own guide variation of it based on the guideline from CDC. Mm-hmm. Social distancing, hygiene and safety equipment, and they've gone as far as designating quarantine areas within the organization. And the challenge that we saw over the course of last few months was that temperature screening, without having a very clear mandate, did not have a lot of attention from the employers. And initially, the employers, when they were coming to embrace that type of temperature screening, the bigger challenge was the cost. So we looked at that individually, if you do it with your the cost was outrageous, like $40,000 if you are even looking at minimum wage earner doing this for the whole year, and going up to $160,000 if you're outsourcing that. So we looked at that as an opportunity, and also like coming back with a solution that can work with for all types of organizations. And this is where we created this IoT device, which can use technology, in fact, to solve the problem of temperature screening. And we all know we are into this COVID situation for another 6 months to a year at least. At
least, I'm not sure if I'm not sure it's going to end at this point. At least in 100%. Maybe there'll be next thing after that. Let's hope not. But I mean, you raise an interesting point. You know, companies, individuals, sort of rush to put in place things that we need to keep going. You know, to kind of get to the next week. We've gone through those phases. And now I imagine organizations are looking at, okay, so what's a more cost-effective way to do this? Or if I'm going to do what I'm doing today, scaling up, a short-term point solution can be oftentimes be very expensive. But it also creates opportunities for innovation, right? Okay, there's a better way to solve this than going and buying, 1,000 temperature sensors. You're going to, have one in every building that's all it does is temperature sensor. Tomorrow you need something else.
Yeah, and that is very true, Mitch. It's not just about the sensors that can solve the problem for today, which we know. Temperature sensing is one of the things related to COVID. But if you look at in the overall scope, we did one of the analysis for a large corporation data, and it came out that if for a 10,000 life company, and that was just a subsegment of that population, if you can give one productive day within the year for every individual and save them the cost of losing their productivity if an individual gets sick, or because of that individual, other people get sick, you save about $1.2 million. So the solution that we thought of, we said, okay, you start there with temperature screening, you start there with addressing COVID, but create a solution which goes much beyond. So we have built protocols for identity verification. We looked at other types of things that are done conventional ways very differently. And we integrated all that into a simple experience where this device that we have built can take on additional things like you replace the card reader function that we have currently to access the facilities, can give you a broader management of these IoT devices through an interface. And administratively, you can manage all your facilities at a global scale. So things like that are helpful, and you're absolutely right, like just not solving the immediate problem was our concern, but to bring something in a unique way that is differentiating enough and provide a return on investment for the employers and organizations when they embrace these types of solutions.
I think to your point earlier, even post-COVID, I think we'll find that there's been a real improvement in productivity just from people not being exposed to each other all the time and sharing colds and flu and other things like that. So even in a post-COVID world, it seems like this approach to, are folks healthy, or should we, instead of coming into work because you feel like you have to, or you don't want to let people down or whatever, it's not appropriate to come to work. Stay at home if you're not feeling well. And this is another way. So it seems like there's even a post-COVID productivity benefit to, are people healthy when they come to work, or is this an opportunity to stay home?
That's absolutely right. And we looked at, even in the COVID scenario and post-COVID scenario, that you can create different types of screenings. So we allow for that customization. And that was one of the things which was essential. In fact, in this situation, since the questionnaire that CDC defined initially was being changed depending on the guidelines from every state, or in fact, the organizations.
Every week seemed like.
Every week, right? So you need to do that at a rapid pace. You should be able to do that at a very micro segment level. And at the same time, in future, if things are different, and besides COVID, if you run into something else, which is one of the concerns like employers are planning for, what if this happens 3 years later again? Are we back into this situation? How do we address this in a more meaningful way? Now we have a case study, we have our learnings, and this is where we saw the solution has an opportunity. We said we can create something which is very unique and provides that agility on this pandemic situation. And when we see it next time, we are up and ready to solve it in a much faster turnaround time and in a much better way than it has been addressed so far.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned more than just like temperature screening for an illness like that. You also mentioned access cards, probably. I'm assuming you're talking about identity management, maybe facial recognition or other technologies.
That's exactly right. So we built facial right into this IoT offering, and facial can be used for identity detection, and at the same time, access to the facilities. And the compliance is met more when you have this all like audit trailed. Certain organizations and certain interests, when they come and say facial is not something that we want to do due to privacy concerns. So we build those controls in that you can turn these things off, turn these things on, depending on the situation. But at least your functionality in the back of your systems remains intact. And then whatever we create can tie back into your existing workflows, back office systems, your security systems, and things that you have not envisioned today. We created an API on top of it. Whenever a scan happens on the device, we trigger an API function which can now be addressed through any sort of protocol that you want to get addressed in the back. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of approach we took, rather than just building a device which does a particular thing, but bringing that into a platform way such that it can be utilized in different forms, and certain things we may not even have envisioned today, right? So there may be multiple use cases of this. And we are expanding this device, I'll say the line of devices. We want to go as far as getting the screenings done, which are done manually on the biometric screening side, as far as we can go from this. So that's the idea. We are building different kinds of devices that are allowing us to enable such sort of functions. And again, the idea is pretty much same, that reduce the cost and also create an operational excellence from the health side for any type of organization, whether it is small or large.
Do you have any of these devices you're talking about available, or are they online, or how folks can see what kind of, because you're talking about a sort of multifunction function programmable IoT device. Well, oftentimes we think of IoT as it's only a web camera or it's only a door sensor. They're doing very limited functions, but what you're describing seems much more customizable and adaptable.
Yeah, so I have one here, so at least you can see how this looks like, right? So this is the device right now. This is the same technology on the top, which is the infrared sensor, like we have with the handheld. And it's more accurate because you can put it on a wall or a stand on your desk. So it's stable rather than your hand moving on the forehead, and detects the picture and other functions. There are a lot of controls that are built in. Now we want to expand this, and the other devices which are shaping up from this is for your transit authority. And that one is a smaller device than this. When you are going into your transit, we are scanning individuals for temperature today. The other type of devices that we are building on is on the health screening side, where we are looking at expanding this function and going much beyond that, simply doing the temperature screening, but into other kind of screening. And I'll give you a test case for that. If you look at currently, annual screenings are done by employers, and it's very costly. The way annual screenings are done, it's all manual. If it's on-site or it's at lab or home test kits, again, the compliance is a little bit short on that on the home side. Mm-hmm. So all these options are there, but they cost money. Now, looking at the tech where we are in IoT, I think there are a lot of improvements, and these things are being done. A lot of progression is happening. So certain functions can be made more available, can be made more frequent, and that can be done using the technology. And that's the idea we have, which we have been working on. And this is just the start, which we launched and released, since you asked that. So the device is functional, device is already in the market. You can acquire it through us, through Microsoft. We have a very strong partnership with them. Or you can just simply, get that through Amazon also at some point. We're planning to do that. So multiple options, multiple channels, and idea is pretty much the same. Make it accessible for everyone, whether it's a small company, large company, because there is a certain segment of the population we believe is left underserved, and we want to bring them on. Overall, everybody is participating in some shape or form to improve the healthcare of this country, right? Or to impact the healthcare on both sides. So it should not be a function of the privilege. It should not be the function of where companies have budgets to do it, but we want to bring it down to a point that any company can offer such sort of function to their employees.
I'm curious what you're finding in talking with companies about this. Is it sort of a necessary evil? Is it sort of just something we think we're going to need to do into the future going forward? Is it a safety for our existing employees and people that are in our buildings? How do companies approach this challenge? I mean, you could say the same question about whether it's putting plexiglass in cafes and coffee areas or other things to help with distancing and protection. But here you're talking about kind of collecting information about people, digitally as they're coming into a building, for example, scanning their temperature, scanning their identity and associating that together. Is this something companies you think businesses are in a place to accept that responsibility, or are they still kind of struggling with, what do I need to do? How do I do it? Is this what I have to do?
Very good point, Mitch. The reason is awareness is not there. So a lot of companies, great ideas, but their business is not creating these devices, right? So if you look at large corporations, they have their own things that they need to perform well on, right? And this sort of function is left on the side. And HR, even though they want to do it, they're still on the cursory of that, yes, is there something like that? You have to be technical to understand it. And that simplicity of communication does not exist. Based on our conversations, it has come out that companies are already looking at the progressive companies, and some of the companies have implemented things in a different way than how it was being addressed by many companies in the COVID situation. And we started this pretty much last year, and suddenly this thing happened, and now it became a boon for us that, yes, this is something that we can utilize in such situations. And companies in the conversations when we have, they're accepting the fact that anytime if this is a secure thing, right, which is security and privacy is very big, right? It plays a very important role in it. If it is secure enough, if it cuts down certain functions that we are doing today, whether it is on the identity side, and brings it all together, technically save not just on the cost, on the hard cost of having these systems, on the capital expense, I'll say, on the systems, but on the operational side, you save operational expenditure over the period of time too. And these are the things I think with COVID, they have been looking at a little bit more, because some certain costs have come outright in front of them, which they did not plan for earlier. So acceptance is a bit more, I would say, at this time, versus if I was talking about this until last year, because things were in place, everything is working in its own, I'll say, cool way, and not a change is required. But now you're not left with a choice. That's the problem. And then it's more and more people looking at, or companies looking at, yes, more innovation in the tech space. Similarly, with like having a remote employee work, right, which we have seen the boom, right, telehealth, very similar.
I hate to invest a lot of money in something that's a throwaway, right, in 6 months. I'm curious, who is the typical organization or function in a company that would look for something like this? Is it HR because they're figuring out policies? Is it the physical security group because they control who comes into the building? Is it the IT organization? Who is it that looks for a better mousetrap of way of solving this problem? Or maybe it's finance and says, oh my gosh, we're spending a lot of money on this stuff. There's got to be a better way. Would somebody go and see what's in market?
Excellent question, Bitch. It depends on the company. Let me set the record straight. Companies which are smaller, I think it becomes a finance function at that point. Companies which are larger, a new type of role has emerged and has become prominent. Generally, you will find health and safety professionals now in companies. Just earlier it was HR, but now there is a special designation that has come out of it. There are health and safety professionals.
Health being the new part of it, right?
Right. And then at the same time, it's not just one individual who's overseeing all that. There is generally a committee that is formed, and you will end up seeing finance individuals inside that. You will see HR individuals inside that. You will see facility admins inside that. And collectively, I think that decision is being made at a larger scale organization. On a smaller scale, it's, I think, a finance function. And at the same time, making a decision, you need to keep the doors open. How can we make sure that compliance is met? How can we make sure at the employee level that employees are feeling comfortable coming into the company? And this was one of the companies that we did initial pilots with. They didn't have employees who were ready to come on board, and this was an essential business. So we had the solution implemented. They contacted us, and Microsoft did a story on this as well online. And it looked that overall, the cost that we saved for them was one factor, which is from $375 per day, or about like $136,000 a year, dropping it down to $5,000 a year. Substantial improvement. And on the cost side, but at the same time, within 4 weeks, we went from 2 individuals in the office to 100% individuals coming into the office. And that was a big thing, that comfort, that sense of the security in terms of making sure that employee has taken enough steps to make the site secure was essential. And they further expanded that and putting since the device is capable not only for the office, but also, like I said, for the transit functionality, for buildings like entrances, parking entrances, elevators, and going much beyond into retail stores. And for the walk-in customers like dental office, perfect case where this device is being used. When you walk into a dental, and those scenarios, everything together, I think, came to a point that it's not just a one one role, one function that is making the decision, but it's spanning across within the organization to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, great. Before we wrap things up, so what's happening next? Where are you headed with HealthPer and with this product? Give us an idea over the next kind of 6 to 12 months where you see yourselves going.
We are going to expand this line of devices, and like I mentioned earlier, our roadmap is big. We would eventually get into other areas of tracking other types of metrics. So our research is working on that, and few we have. But right now, our focus is to make sure we solve the current problem and at least be participant in some form to reducing the exposure of this pandemic that has put every one of us, right? Each one of us on our desk, in our houses, compacted, right?
None of us are in familiar territory, right?
Right? And making sure we can at least be a contributor to ease the pandemic in some form. And if it is technology that we know best, if that's the way that we can help out, then our goal is to make sure we make it addressable for any size organization, like I mentioned earlier, to solve this. Mm-hmm. And over the period of time, we are transforming into a complete health IoT company. And we have well-being, which we know pretty much for I think for a long period of time. We have created solutions. Anybody can get those solutions now on Azure. We made it as simple as that you can now, if you want a well-being solution, go and get it. If you want a challenge, just go and get it from Microsoft under their standard Microsoft licensing terms. You don't have to even think. Just press a few clicks and you're done. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of ease we are trying to bring in on the screening side as well. So we are looking at, don't make it a function of a cost because you think it's costly to get the screening and checkups done. We want to make it easy that these things are an ongoing things for individuals, whether it is employees of large corporations or smaller companies. And health is on top of everyone's mind to make sure that they are taking care of them beyond COVID. It's not just about COVID. That is our long-term, I'll say, roadmap in terms of the company.
It's an important point because it's not just the safety of the environment, it's the perception of the safety, right? I'm not saying it's only the perception, but you can have a very safe environment, but if people don't feel safe for whatever reason, that can prevent them from coming into work, staying in a job, whatever it might be. Well, Narinder, this has been great talking with you about it. I wish you the best with the product. Tell us about your website where people can go to find out more if they're interested in this.
Well, they can simply go on www.healthper.com, connect with me on the LinkedIn, or go to Microsoft and get the product from there from the Azure Marketplace or App Source.
Okay, and that's HealthPer, HealthPer.com, correct?
That's right. It's like health and person. We want to make health personal and bring everything together.
Excellent. Well, I hope you come back and keep us up to date how things are going, and I wish you the best.
Thank you, Mitch. Thanks for your time today.
You bet. Great to have you on, Narinder.
Thanks.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, that's a wrap for this edition of TechStrong TV. Alan will be back tomorrow. I'm sure you're all missing him. But I also want to remind the audience real quick before we close things out that we had our annual DevOps Experience Virtual Summit last Thursday. It is now available on demand. If anybody is interested in checking it out, just go to DevOpsExperience.com. Until tomorrow, everybody, please have a great day and please stay safe. Stay strong. Stay tech strong.